This year, of course, is of particular significance as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of diplomatic ties between Australia and China. December 1972. Now, some in this room will not remember 1972. Many of us do. But 1972 was also the year that Dick Hamer was elected Premier of Victoria, just 2 months before those diplomatic relationships were established. And as we know, it was Dick Hamer who demonstrated such fantastic foresight by establishing Victoria's sister state relationship with Jiangsu Province, an achievement which has underpinned Victoria's formal relationship with China for more than 30 years now. An extraordinary step taken by Premier Dick Hamer. And of course, Melbourne itself has a sister city relationship with Tianjin, and 14 of our local councils have subsequently established sister city relationships. Victoria has a very good presence and relationship with China. But as we know, our relationships with China go back much longer than the 70s and the 80s. And indeed, a stone's throw from here, the Treasury building, once full to the brim in the vaults with gold from the goldfields, much of that gold prospected and found and discovered by Chinese immigrants who were here at the time. We should never forget it. That was a building built at that time by a young immigrant, a young 19-year-old designer, and at that time, barely 100,000 people living in Melbourne. And it is a symbol, like so much of those gold rush days, a symbol of an aspirational society, a young and growing society, and that's what Victoria is based on. We should also recognise the oldest Chinatown in Australia, just down the road from here. An asset still and much loved. And we should recognise also that that relationship hasn't always been happy. From time to time, there have been troubles. And the China question of the 1890s was such a time, but happily now long since resolved. The legacy of the Chinese who settled here, set up small businesses and quickly became success stories in their own right, has been very profound for all Victorians. People like Lo Kong Meng and Louis Amoy, who between them were the founders, two of the founders of the Commercial Bank of Australia in the 1860s. Now, obviously, a key part of one of our four major banks, Westpac. Two Chinese business leaders at the foundation of our banking system in Victoria and Australia. We have a unique history in this state, and we have a very strong and common bond with China. We were in Shanghai 15 years. Victoria was represented in Shanghai 15 years before the new Commonwealth government established formal representation in China. And I want to just refer to a newspaper clip from the time. In December 1908, of all times. 1908, and it referred to what might be described as an amusing insight to our relationship. And it reads, a complaint was received by the Premier from the Prime Minister that Mr. R.B. Levian, Victorian commercial agent in Shanghai, was inserting advertisements in the North China papers emphasising the advantages of Victoria as a place for settlement. 1908. And that the headings of these advertisements made it appear that they were inserted by the Commonwealth. Now, the article goes on to describe how the Commonwealth then sent cables to Mr. Levian saying, can't do that. Mr. Levian sending back cables saying, wait on, that was my instruction, that was my authority. Well, let me go on to quote the authority from the time, who sent a further cable to Mr. Levian, and it reads, the only federal authority, the state agent in the East who recently did some state advertising under the heading of the Commonwealth, was to enable him to issue passports to wealthy Chinese who proposed visiting Australia. Not much has changed. He had no right, it went on, the federal official state, to make it appear that the Commonwealth was Victoria and Victoria was the Commonwealth. I like that twist, I've got to say. And it does underscore the relationship, the long relationship between Victoria and China. We share history, trade and long-standing friendships and relationships. And China is Victoria's #1 trading partner. China is our #1 tourism market. And we have 60,000 Chinese-born Victorians and a further 200,000 Victorians who claim Chinese ancestry. That relationship is not, though, just about trade engagement. It's about so much more. It's always been multidimensional with an emphasis on educational and cultural links, and we are now moving to a new level of engagement, something which I want to speak about briefly today. Last September I had the privilege of visiting China on the very first overseas trip I took as Premier, and I believe that was a fitting commitment. And this year Victoria will return to China with what we believe will be Australia's largest ever trade mission, with more than 400 businesses across 10 key sectors of Victoria's economy joining us in that trade mission. The building relationships is not only important economically and culturally, it's also important for our future. And I want to give you one small example. On that trip I took last year, and this very much goes to things that have been in my heart, we visited Wujing in Changzhou, which is a part of Jiangsu province. And there we saw Victorian architects at work. Major projects of a civic nature, which in our terms we would value at billions of dollars. And included the work of Studio 505, and they have moved on and brought representatives from Wujing back here. Wujing has an annual flower show, and our international flower show, and they'll be visiting Wujing. And indeed, we went on and visited Nanjing, and there in Nanjing, Lab Studios, the architects of Federation Square here, doing 20 square kilometres of planning in Nanjing beside the Yangtze. They are but two of the stories that we saw and continue to support in China. As you all know, China's growth is quite simply staggering. It's worth reflecting on, nevertheless, the great transition that's occurring, and the numbers do tell the story. Between 2007 and 2012, high-income economies are projected to have grown by 3%. China will have grown by 60%. And to put this into context, in the first decade of this century, the additional output from China, India, Brazil, Korea, Mexico, Russia and Turkey equal the additional output from the G7 economies as a share of world GDP. In the current decade, according to the chairman of Goldman Sachs, China alone might equal the G7 contribution to global growth. That's an extraordinary understanding. HSBC, our sponsors here today, expect China to overtake the US as the world's top trading nation by 2016. And the Economist Intelligence Unit recently ranked global cities by economic strength, which measures GDP, growth rate and purchasing power, and 12 of the top 20 cities rated are in China. Now, most of you will have witnessed the phenomenal changes that are occurring in China. It's on a scale and pace that's quite simply unprecedented. And I don't want anyone in Victoria to not understand that, nor to take it for granted. A further 100 million people migrating to urban areas in the next 10 years in China. 100 million people. China having 220 plus cities with more than 1 million people, and 23 cities with more than 5 million people. In other words, 23 Victorias within the next 13 years. A middle class growing to 700 million in the next 10 years. Nearly half of China's population. The issue for us is how we in Victoria make the most of our strengths and our relationships in the face of increasing competition and increasing uncertainty in global markets, and how we make the most of it in our relationship with China. There's no doubt the continuing uncertainty in Europe with the debt crisis is spreading uncertainty, and it does hurt global demand and demand for our products and those of our trading partners. And creditworthiness of governments is under scrutiny like it's never been before. And that's why we in Victoria have been determined to rebuild our state's finances and put a responsible budget position on the table in this state. And we maintain that commitment. A strong, flexible domestic economy is absolutely essential in positioning us to weather external shocks and global instability and make the most of the opportunities that we do have. But while there are those major challenges globally, and policies we would say at the federal level which only increase the uncertainty, there are, as I say, major opportunities. Even if China's growth moderates, it's still projected to remain at an extraordinary 7 to 8%. In 8 years' time, China's economy will be 3 times the size it is today. As ANZ CEO Mike Smith recently observed, we're not talking about something cyclical here. We're talking about a permanent structural shift. And while we are connected to the region, while we do have the relationships, it's questionable whether Australia is really taking advantage of those relationships and fully harnessing the potential that such a significant market presents for our products and services and our people. Integration with global markets enhances economic growth, of that there is no doubt. And prosperity in Victoria's future will be determined by the steps we take now and in the next few years to position ourselves to take advantage of those opportunities. We need more Victorian success stories like Murray Goulburn, like Studio 505 I mentioned, like Lab Architects, like the ANZ, those businesses making their mark in China and Asia. And the mindset of Victorian businesses must therefore be one of internationalisation, more importantly, engagement with Asia on a scale like we've never seen before, and like I suspect businesses in Victoria and right across Australia don't yet quite appreciate the scale of that engagement. And given the importance of government-to-government relationships in Asia, Victoria has a unique role to play in assisting business to achieve in its objectives by introducing and supporting Victorian expertise. But as a nation, I believe we can do much more to grow our industries and create more jobs. China has set the goal of expanding its total overseas foreign direct investment to reach $560 billion with its 5-year plan, up from $68 billion in 2010. Close to 10 times the level of foreign investment. Yet China's current total overseas foreign direct investment in Australia is relatively modest at present. What's not helpful for attracting investment is Commonwealth uncertainty, policy uncertainty, leadership uncertainty, uncertainty about taxation systems, whether it's the mining tax, the carbon tax or the withholding tax. They are all relevant to that investment decision. And if those decisions are tempered by any steps which send the wrong signals, then we do put at risk our own future. From a Victorian perspective, our clear focus will be to proactively articulate the investment value propositions to Chinese investors that we have here, and I believe they're strong. We're determined to see more high-profile companies establishing their regional headquarters in Melbourne to grow our economy and increase employment. And companies like the Bank of China and financial services companies like KVB, Yuanlan, or logistics company Costco, Oceana and ChemChina, which recently signed a $2 billion contract to guarantee the supply of methane and LPG to the Qenos Altona plant. Those companies are but the beginning. What this means for us in Victoria with our diverse economy, underpinned by skills, knowledge and know-how, is that the demand for our expertise, our services, our education, our agricultural products, our tourism products will be much greater than ever before. Victoria may only have 3% of Australia's landmass, but we already produce 25% of the nation's GDP. China's growth is not just about Australia's mining riches, but everyone needs to understand it's also increasingly about services and commodities. And while China will need to meet the demand of its emerging middle class and a meteoric rise in personal consumption, by 2020 that will be 2/3 of the United States consumption level. That's good news for Victoria, it's good news for businesses in Victoria, it's good news because it's an opportunity to partner with China in China's growth. It means greater opportunity in food and beverage, education, automotive, advanced engineering, ICT, sustainable urban design, and we're seeing that now, biotech, research and development, tourism, professional services across the board, such as financial and legal services. And it's worth reflecting on our strengths in that regard. We're home here in Victoria to 5 of Australia's top 10 companies and some of Australia's largest industry and private super funds. We have a strong and diverse $31 billion manufacturing sector which employs some 300,000 people. We're a global hub for research in life sciences, biotech, advanced engineering and ICT. And we possess abundant food, water and agricultural expertise, producing more than 80% of Australia's dairy product. And I know Richard Del Riva, the Minister, referred to this last night. And we've got exceptional education institutions. And Monash University in particular, I want to mention, who have just been granted a licence by China to operate as a university in China, in their own right. The first Australian licence, such licence, and only the 3rd foreign university to be granted such a licence ever. And that's a major achievement for Monash, it's a major achievement for Victoria, it's a major achievement for Australia's higher education sector. And we lead the way in sustainable urban development. And we enjoy relatively low-cost power. And we're at the heart of the nation's transport network. And we've got a very strong and vibrant multicultural community which represents, as you know, a gateway to the world and a gateway to investment. And in Victoria, China has a trading partner with the capacity to enable and partner with China in the next stage of development. So what are we doing in Victoria? What are we doing as a government? Well, we're determined to lead the way when it comes to international engagement, and we believe we are. We've been actively engaged with the Commonwealth's Asian Century White Paper, and we're one of only 3 states to have contributed to that paper. And we're looking forward to seeing the review's outcomes and particularly see whether there will be policy changes at the federal level that enhance that engagement with Asia. But when it comes to engaging with our nearest neighbours, Victoria is not waiting for Canberra to take the lead. We've just opened a State of Victoria representative office in Beijing, the epicentre of China's political power, and we recognise that, and obviously a vital centre of finance, trade and commerce and administration in its own right. And that office, in addition to our existing offices in Shanghai, in Nanjing and Hong Kong, will operate as a commercial embassy for Victoria, one dedicated to the all-important relationship. And this gives Victoria the strongest presence of any state in Australia in China. In addition, following our visit to China last year, we're about to significantly ramp up our activity. And in September this year, I will, as I said, be leading a trade mission, the largest ever, to China. And I expect that mission will attract, as I said, in excess of 400 businesses. It will showcase Victoria's excellence and expertise and build further on the close government and business links we already share. And I'm very confident, given the trade missions that we have run, that this will be good for business, good for the relationship and good for our economy. We know those trade missions work and we're determined to increase the level of activity. And we intend to more than double the level of trade mission activity over the next 12 months. We will, in addition, spend a further $50 million over the next 4 years to boost our international engagement. This funding will help grow our international links and increase Victoria's exports and investments, and we're already reviewing all aspects of our approach to international engagement so we can do it better in the future. And it's not something you can ever take for granted. You have to keep at it, keep adapting, keep changing, keep refreshing, and that's what we intend to do. We'll also be announcing a strategy for Victoria-China engagement as part of a wider international engagement strategy, which outlines policy directions and initiatives for the next 5 years. And that will identify which second and third tier cities in the west of China, in the southwest of China, many of which have already got extraordinary growth rates. And we're looking to see which of those cities we can have further relationships with to ensure Victoria stays ahead of the game. A key element of this strategy will be building Asian literacy. And that's in the broader community here and in the business community, and drawing more effectively on the expertise and networks that exist here already in our Chinese community and in our business community. And I've got to say, that's a critical part of it. It is always about relationships. Nothing is a given. The relationships have to be struck, nurtured, and looked after. And a greater understanding of China is essential to make those relationships work and to get the most out of our competitiveness. We need more of what's going on in this room. And I'll come to that a little later. Whether it's language skills, cultural literacy, knowledge of the system in China, multicultural business leaders, exchanges, we need more of it. And speaking of improving Asian literacy, today I'm absolutely delighted to announce the first round of successful applicants of the inaugural Hamer Scholarships, which we announced last year. A fantastic initiative that will see 50 young Victorian professionals engage in intensive Mandarin language study at a Jiangsu-based university. And that will provide a much-needed boost for the Chinese-focused skill sets for Victoria, supporting businesses and industry and further strengthening our relationship. We also see significant opportunities in the world of finance. And some of those figures I mentioned before are daunting. But we shouldn't be daunted by them, we should be challenged and recognise the opportunities. As you all, I'm sure, know, China is in the process of internationalising its currency, and one outcome of that approach is the new currency swap between Australia's Reserve Bank and the People's Bank of China. And this move allows for the exchange of local currencies between the two central banks of up to $30 billion over an initial 3-year period. Now, by establishing a line of liquidity like that of up to $30 billion, the agreement has the potential to bolster Australia-China trade relationships settled in RMB. Trade in the Chinese currency has implications for the terms Australian firms can negotiate with their Chinese partners and offers the potential to reduce currency risk. That in itself is a significant development. And today I'm also very pleased to announce that the Victorian Government, together with the ANZ, will deliver workshops for Victorian businesses seeking to exploit those opportunities for trading in RMB. And those workshops will be held in Victoria and in China as part of the Super Trade Mission later this year. We're also being proactive in tourism. Tourism is critical to the economic mix in Victoria and to our prosperity, and deepening the links between our peoples, our cultures and our economies is crucial in growing two-way trade. The China visitor market is already Victoria's most valuable international tourism market, and it generates more than $800 million each year. On current growth rates, Victoria is expected to receive 500,000 Chinese overnight visitors by 2020, almost double what we currently receive. This growth represents an extraordinary opportunity, but a challenge for Victoria's tourism and related industries. And today, the government in Victoria is launching a comprehensive Victoria-Chinese tourism strategy. This strategy aims to increase Chinese overnight visitor expenditure from the forecast 7% per year to 11% by 2020. Tourism Victoria estimates that this level of growth could potentially contribute $18 billion plus in gross state product over the 10-year period and create more than 40,000 jobs by 2020. It's an opportunity, it's in front of us, and we're taking action to grasp it. They're ambitious targets, we acknowledge that, but we believe that the right policy framework, planning and working constructively with industry, they are achievable in what is an increasingly competitive market. And I just want to touch on the elements of the strategy. The strategy sets out how we will achieve those targets and includes a number of streams. Firstly, strengthening Victoria's market positioning. Secondly, improving our tourism offering, including Chinese language services. Thirdly, building on our strong education, migrant and business links. Fourth, creating a world-class experience for Chinese visitors. And finally, aligning tourism investment to the Chinese visitor market. And to support this strategy, in the second half of this year, Victoria will commence an $8 million tourism marketing campaign in China that will aim to attract more Chinese visitors in Melbourne and Victoria. And it's the first major international consumer marketing campaign to be run in China. And I'm very confident that not only this is the right step, but it's an important and critical step for Victoria. So, in conclusion, what do we know? We know that China will grow. We know the nature of that growth will change over time. We know that change presents an opportunity for Victoria. And we know these opportunities will come in industries in which Victoria has already got significant advantages. Agriculture, education, professional services, tourism, energy, biotech and cultural opportunities. We know Victoria has a track record which is positive in this relationship. And we do, I believe, have a head start. I have every confidence that China will be an increasing presence in the lives of all Victorians. And I am equally confident that over the years, China will be on the lips and minds of future generations of Victorians every day. And China will be as much of a part of our lives in the future as football is. Can I say, as I have said before, China is undoubtedly a rising star, and Victoria will undoubtedly star in that rise. And I believe that events like this are absolutely critical. And I also believe that in time, this annual Australia-China Business Week will become instead the annual Australia-China Business Year.